Bob went on The Price is Right in early 2024 and absolutely killed it.
I'd like to buy a vowel, Pat.
He ended up winning both halves of a vacation to Hawaii and is cashing in early with just one issue. Bob has never flown. Welcome back to Live ATL. I'm your host, Caden Smith, and we're back today with an absolute treat of a pod about the world-famous Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The term hub city isn't taken lightly here in Atlanta. It's the most traveled through city in the world. The Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport has gained a reputation as the busiest airport you'll ever set foot in. In this episode, we have the treat of speaking to four guests who will pull back the curtain on the airport's operations and discuss how safety has remained king throughout its history. Last week, I had the pleasure of speaking with Sam Worth, an architectural expert out of the Georgia Institute of Technology who specialized in airport construction and history. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is what he wrote his main thesis on while he was studying architecture at the school.
Yeah, so there's about 100 years of history on this place. Atlanta Speedway was the original name of the place. It was just one racetrack, and it got abandoned because they decided not to use it anymore. In 1925, they signed a lease on the land, which was 287 acres, committing the city to building an airfield, since there wasn't one in Atlanta yet. It was named Candler Field after the Coca-Cola founder and Atlanta mayor, Asa Candler. And it's interesting because there's this term in architecture called adaptive reuse, which is reusing a site for something that it wasn't originally intended for. So started out as a racetrack, but here we are turning it into an airport. The first plane to fly into Candler Field was a mail plane in September of 1926, and then two different airlines started using Atlanta as their chief hub of service. It was Pitcairn Aviation and Delta Air Services, now known as Eastern and Delta Airlines respectively. The airport then became joined with the Atlanta Army Airfield, was used for combat aircraft, and during World War II surpassed New York and Chicago, and became the busiest airport in the country. In 1942, it was renamed Atlanta Municipal Airport. In 1957, it became the world's busiest airport, and then started a $21 million construction of a new terminal, which consisted of 6 concourses surrounded by a central building that opened in 1961. In 1971, it was renamed not once, but twice. First to William B. Hartsfield Atlanta Airport, and then later to William B. Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport as the flights began reaching outside of just North America. In 1977, the airport realized they need a lot more room to house all the passengers coming in and out, so they started the largest construction project in the South of the time, which was a $500 million complex designed by Stevens and Wilkinson, Smith, Hinchman, and Grillis, and minority airport architects and planners. And they said that they wanted the airport to be a new front door to an international gateway to the world. The design of the terminal with runways on each side was revolutionary and is used in airports around the world. The glass atrium above the terminal is used to bring the outside inside, and the transportation mall, which is a connection between two concourses, creates an immersive experience that isn't seen in any other airport around the world. The new complex that initially consisted of the North and South Terminal Concourses A through D and the first half of Concourse T, which used to be the International Terminal, opened in 1980. It was designed to accommodate 55 million passengers per year and covered 2.5 million square feet. In 1984, a fourth runway was completed and another runway was extended. The southern extension of Concourse T opened in 1987 and Concourse E opened in 1994 in advance of Atlanta hosting the 1996 Summer Olympics, and Concourse T then became converted to domestic flights as they opened the new international terminal. The MARTA rail service was also extended to the airport in 1988, even though the station was built in 1980. It wasn't ready to be used yet. They realized that after all of this construction, they still needed more room to house all the incoming passengers, so they created a new budget of $5.4 billion, which then got changed to $9 billion to expand the airport. In 2001, construction began on a fifth runway. The runway actually crosses over Interstate 285, and it is the only airport in the country with a runway above an interstate. This project was very ambitious, but ended up forcing them to elevate fill dirt up to 11 stories high and led to the demolition of surrounding neighborhoods, but it was necessary to house all the passengers coming in and out. Then it was renamed another time after a debate about dropping the old mayor's name from the airport's title, but they decided to keep it and added another mayor, and now the airport is Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport to include Mayor Maynard Jackson. They now have another $6 million plan to update a few concourses and bring the airport into the 21st century, mostly to improve the experience for the passengers more than the functionality of the airport itself, including new floorings, new ceilings, new motorized walkways, and updating the indoor malls. Architecture in its essence is finding a balance between function and aesthetics, and while there's very good looking parts of the airport, they mostly focused on function as the number of passengers became overwhelming and they needed to increase functionality before anything else. Now they're using a very large chunk of money to focus on aesthetics and enjoyability. The airport itself is a feat of architecture seen almost nowhere else. It is one of the most significant energy renewal sites using solar farms to reduce carbon footprint. It has facial recognition and biometrics to speed along security, houses 300 stores and restaurants, and has an 1,000 square foot gym, and on top of all of that, has a MARTA system built in connecting you to not only the entire city of Atlanta, but the terminals themselves.
Think about this. You're traveling to Hawaii in economy, coasting along at 33,000 feet above sea level at nearly 600 miles an hour. This is higher than even Mount Everest.
Wow, that's higher than I thought. Shiva Subramanian is a biomedical engineering student at Georgia Tech, here to speak about various health safety measures taken in the last 25 years at this specific airport and those across the country.
Yeah, and the crazy part is, if you were on Mount Everest, the atmospheric pressure would be about 33% of the pressure at sea level.
That means there's 66% less oxygen in the atmosphere than when you are sitting comfortably near your warm fireplace.
Here's the kicker. With these oxygen levels at the top of the mountain, you would be at risk of severe nausea, dizziness, and even hypoxia, which is what your body faces when your organs and tissues aren't getting nearly as much oxygen as they need to be. If prolonged, this can lead to a loss of consciousness, or worse.
That does not sound good.
So how on earth do travelers on airplanes thousands of feet above this survive? That is the work of biomedical engineers who help build cabin pressurization systems. These ensure that the pressure inside of the cabin remains at a safe level for passengers, and the passengers have enough oxygen to breathe comfortably.
So do these cabin pressurization systems push additional oxygen into the plane since there's less of it outside?
Actually, no. The cabin pressurization system just makes sure that the pressure inside the cabin is closer to one standard atmospheric unit, keeping people safe from the atmospheric pressure just outside, which is closer to 0.3 ATM at 30,000 feet.
Okay, so it basically just simulates the environment of the ground with an atmospheric pressure that matches that of what people are used to.
Yeah, and this is good. It keeps people safe. But think about the oxygen. If not much additional oxygen is being added, then that means that for the most part, even though some fresh air enters through the pressurization systems, the oxygen is recirculating throughout the plane for the whole flight.
Which means when Bob starts hearing people coughing around the plane, he'll start to get concerned that he will suffer the same fate.
Exactly. That's why in airports as large and as busy as Atlanta's, every large commercial airplane has ways to combat this. They don't want people getting sick from other people on the other side of the plane, but they still want to recirculate the same air since the air outside has oxygen levels that are way too low.
So basically, they need a way to keep people safe from the outside atmosphere and keep people safe from the other people.
Right. That's why every airplane has high-efficiency particulate air filters throughout the aircraft. You might have heard of them being called HEPA filters.
Oh, like a mask?
Yeah, but these filters are also used to trap airborne particles and respiratory droplets.
Like the particles that get released when someone coughs or sneezes on a plane.
These particles are usually anywhere between 0.1 to 5 microns in size, which is on the scale of 1/1,000,000th of a meter. HEPA filters are designed to capture this size exactly, and they are the most effective for particles of 0.3 microns in size. There was actually a study done that was led by scientists from the University of Tokyo, Japan, and from the University of Wisconsin. It was done in 2022 and called Effectiveness of HEPA Filters at Removing Infectious SARS-2 from the Air.
Does this have anything to do with the coronavirus outbreak?
Yeah, it does. They first constructed a test chamber where they placed an air cleaner with a HEPA filter. They had a compressor nebulizer on the other side, which was meant to disperse virus droplets and aerosols throughout this test chamber for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 35.5 minutes. At the end of the trials, they were collected and the scientists were able to quantify how much of the droplets the filter was actually successful in trapping.
A lot of them, hopefully.
Well, kind of. The trial with only 5 minutes was 90% effective, and HEPA filters are generally only considered efficient if they're 99.7% effective, at the very least. It took more than 7 times this, almost 36 minutes, to reach that point. This might seem like a long time for being stuck in an airplane with unpurified air, but airplanes usually counter this by placing HEPA filters throughout the airplane to help ensure the purity of the air. Now both problems are solved. The cabin is pressurized, and people aren't spreading their diseases all over the place.
So I guess our friend Bob has one less thing to worry about. Building off what Sam said, we have another guest in the studio here today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Andy Santana. I'm a mechanical engineer here from Georgia Tech. And continuing off with our history lesson, the security at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport changed a lot after 9/11. Before then, people were able to just go through the screenings wearing their regular belts and everything else that they wore, and it was just handled by private companies. After 9/11, on November 19th of 2001, the Transportation Security Administration Act was passed, and that's when TSA became a thing.
What does that mean more specifically for Hartsfield-Jackson?
So before this, Hartsfield-Jackson had, I believe, like 20-ish security screenings across all of its entire airport, and now it has a total of 36, with the majority of them being in the domestic, as it's a much larger terminal for the 2 terminals that it has. It also means that the technology changed.
Such as what?
So the improvements that we have for our technology is that it now uses advanced millimeter wave imaging technology, and it has much more advanced walk-through metal detectors. People are required to take off their shoes, any hats, as well as their belts and jewelry that they have on to walk through these metal detectors, as well as the advanced imaging goes entirely through their carry-ons and any bags that they're carrying to make realistic 3D images of it.
So what you're saying is that pain that I go through in the airport every time is actually justified.
Yes, it's entirely justified. Like, they're looking at everything that we're taking in, regardless of how small it is, through that advanced imaging to see if there's anything you shouldn't be taking. And it's all like approved liquids and approved items.
How about for various lines like pre-check and clear?
So pre-check and clear requires you to do either an interview as well as taking just your biometrics, and you have to apply online for it. That requires an entire background check on you.
For Bob, this means he can travel through the airport safely, regardless of who's around him. Okay, so obviously the airport isn't just about getting through security at the very beginning. How about stuff such as the tram?
So the tram was built in 1980. It's been going strong for 43 years, and they plan to expand it by like 20-ish% in 2025 to incorporate a lot more passengers. Right now, the tram carries about 250,000 people every day. It is considered an automated people mover, which takes multiple different types of technology to anticipate if anything is on the tracks and when to stop and start and open the doors.
I'm sure your major has a lot to do with that.
Yes, it does.
And then for the terminals specifically, once you get through security, get off the tram, everything like that, what are the different terminals pertain?
So we have 2 terminals at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. We have the international and the domestic terminals. The international terminal has only one concourse, which is Concourse F, while the domestic one has all the other ones, with a total of 192 gates and 7 concourses.
That includes what? Like the TA, B, C, D, and so on at the airport?
Yes, it includes all the concourses. And you just get through it using the tram, which goes through every single one of them. When you buy your airport ticket, it'll tell you where exactly you need to go and how to get there.
Our next guest, Neil, is here mostly to speak about the emissions part of this whole entire process.
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, as Taylor Swift suggests, aviation is the most carbon-intensive activity a person can perform, with ATL Airport being the busiest in the world, supporting 2,100 arrivals and departures each day. It's understandable that Bob is concerned about the emissions he'll produce.
What measures can he take to make up for the carbon emissions he has when taking this flight?
Well, honestly, he can't really do anything about it. But it's okay, because in the past couple decades, aircrafts have improved significantly in efficiency, and although air traffic has increased about 5% each year, carbon emissions have decreased about 3%. Recently, I reviewed an article by Scott C. Herndon et al., and it concerned the emissions by Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport specifically. And in fact, studies showed that the design of the airport specifically allows for aircraft to take off with less fuel than predicted, making this airport more efficient.
So basically, despite the massive amount of emissions caused by airplanes every day, science and engineering has been slowly improving, which almost makes up for this increase.
Yeah, you could put it that way.
This whole process led to one thing. Bob touched down safely in Hawaii. His stress was relieved. He was able to enjoy his vacation with his family, and everything went well. Thank you for listening to this episode of Live ATL, in which we discussed the great Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport and its evolutionary history throughout the last 100 years. In our next episode called FastATL, we will discuss something else Atlanta is very well known for, Chick-fil-A.